You want her here? Fine. Put her in the garage. That's what my daughter-in-law said. I was in the kitchen when she said it. Not hiding, not eavesdropping. Just there refilling the coffee I'd brought from my own pantry, standing in the house I had paid off in full. Morgan didn't lower her voice. She didn't glance in my direction. She said it like I wasn't real. Like I was a bag of old clothes she didn't know where to store. Bryant didn't say anything. He looked down at his phone, then out the window as if it were raining. It wasn't. It was a clear day. My birthday had been 4 weeks earlier. That day, I signed the deed over to him. My gift, I'd said. For the future. For the kids. For stability. 3 days after that, I was moved into the garage. At first, they said it was just for the weekend while they cleared out the guest room. Then it became a week. Then the air mattress was replaced with a fold-up cot. The boxes around me never moved. My suitcase sat half open next to a box of broken Christmas lights and a mower that hadn't worked in 5 years. I didn't complain. I didn't ask for the room back. I made my bed in the garage and kept to myself. I still made coffee in the morning. I still folded laundry. I tried to stay out of Morgan's way. But the insulation never came. That night, I laid under a thin blanket with my coat still on, watching condensation collect on the metal beams above me. The cold air cut through my sleeves down into my bones. I thought about the last conversation I'd had with Bryant before the deed signing. "You'll always have a home here, Mom," he'd said, placing his hand over mine. "Your family." I used to believe that when a child grew up, they carried pieces of you with them. Your lessons, your love, your sacrifices. I didn't know they could leave those pieces behind. I stared at the ceiling, blinking back the sting in my eyes and whispered, "I raised a man. He became someone else." We bought that house in 1983. A single-story ranch with cedar shingles and a cracked chimney that leaned just slightly to the left. Thomas and I didn't mind. We patched it together with sweat and secondhand tools. We spent Saturdays sanding floorboards, weeknights painting walls. Every piece of it held our fingerprints. I remember holding Bryant in one arm and a drill in the other. He learned to walk across that living room, took his first fall on those concrete steps. We planted 2 apple trees in the backyard and watched them grow with him. When Thomas died, the house became a kind of anchor. I clung to it like a lifeline. The mortgage became my only promise to keep it, to protect what he left behind. I made every payment on time. Every pipe that burst I fixed. Every roof leak I handled. Bryant used to tell me one day, "I want my kids to run down this hallway like I did." He said it more than once. I believed him, so when he and Morgan said they were struggling to afford anything in the area, I offered them the house. "You can have it," I said. "Just promise you'll keep it standing." I didn't ask for rent. I didn't set conditions. I thought giving them the house was giving them a future. I thought it was love. Now I can't use the main bathroom. Morgan says it's for privacy. They gave me a drawer in the laundry room to store my things. She started labeling groceries in the fridge, hers mine kids. I opened the cabinet once to grab coffee and found a padlock on the dry goods bin. A small one. Pink, with a key she wore on a chain. She said the kids had food allergies. But I knew it wasn't about them. Each day, the house felt less like mine. The light fixtures were replaced. My curtains were boxed. They even moved the photo of Thomas and me into the garage like it didn't belong in their hallway. I held the frame that night, brushing dust from the glass. The eyes staring back at me still looked like home. And that's when the invitation arrived for a dinner I wasn't expected to attend. The invitation wasn't written. It was whispered. A passing mention from Morgan that her parents and sister would be coming by Saturday night for dinner. She stood in the doorway to the garage, arms folded. Her voice clipped. "We'll be using the dining room," she said. "It's going to be a little crowded." I understood. I always did. I told her I'd stay out of the way. Saturday came fast. The weather had turned. The chill seeped into the concrete, and I layered up in silence. I heard them through the walls. Bryant setting the table, Morgan giving directions, the kids squealing with excitement. The smell of roast chicken and garlic bread drifted through the side door. It used to be mine, my menu, my kitchen. That night, I stayed in the garage. I didn't even ask for a plate. I sat on the cot with a blanket over my lap and a single cup of lukewarm coffee. I didn't turn the light on, just listened. Through the garage door, I could hear laughter, silverware clinking, Morgan's high-pitched voice floating above everyone else's. I waited, thinking maybe someone would remember. Maybe one of them would knock. Maybe Bryant. No one did. Around 9:30, I heard them step outside onto the deck. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. Then I heard her voice clearly. She won't leave. She has nowhere to go. There was a pause, followed by a low chuckle. I couldn't tell whose it was, maybe her father's, maybe Bryant's. It didn't matter. The words were already embedded. She wasn't whispering. She wasn't even pretending anymore. She thought I was stuck, thought I was dependent, thought I had nowhere else in the world to go. I looked around the garage at the boxes marked Misk, at the blanket I had washed by hand in the sink, at the photo of Thomas and me sitting on the shelf like a museum piece. My hands were steady. I didn't cry that night. Instead, I reached for the yellow notepad I kept in my tote bag and turned to a blank page. I wrote down the date. Then one sentence, "They think I'm trapped." And in the morning, I opened the fireproof box at the bottom of my suitcase. The ring had a small stone, nothing flashy. Thomas saved for it by working overtime at the mill, skipping lunches, selling his tools. I wore it for 32 years. Then the day Bryant called from college, panicked over his tuition shortfall, I took it off. No hesitation, no guilt, just did what mothers do. It barely covered 2 semesters. After Thomas died, I worked at the county office. By day, wiped tables at the diner by night. The car I drove was older than some of the kids Bryant studied with, but I kept it running with duct tape and prayer. There was always something that needed paying. Always someone else who needed more than I did. I gave up new shoes. I gave up weekends. I gave up the idea of retiring by the lake like we'd once planned. When Morgan and Bryant got engaged, they couldn't afford a wedding. So I offered my backyard. I strung up lights, planted flowers, bought folding chairs in bulk. I paid for the caterer, the music, her dress. They said it was beautiful, and for a little while it was. After the baby was born, I started bringing groceries unasked. When Bryant lost his job for 8 months, I covered the mortgage quietly, telling them I had extra from a tax refund. When Morgan's parents wanted to take a vacation, I watched the kids for 5 straight days and didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night. And now I was sleeping behind a lawnmower. That week, I started writing things down. 1 page for the money, 1 page for the favors, 1 for the comments, every offhand insult or moment I was made to feel like an inconvenience. A separate page just for the food labels. Yogurt, not yours. Bread, please ask. I wasn't angry, not exactly. I was tired. Tired in the kind of way that settles into your bones and makes them ache even when you're sitting still. I flipped the notepad to a clean sheet and wrote, "The deed was signed on May 4th, but I kept the other one." Then I reached under the cot and pulled out the envelope. Thomas never made me mail. The envelope was yellowed at the corners, sealed with tape that had long since curled. On the front in Thomas's handwriting were 3 words, "For when you're ready." I had nearly mailed it once, years ago, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not then. Not when Bryant was still in school, still figuring out who he was. Thomas had drafted the amendment the year before he died, just after the cancer came back. He told me he trusted me to decide whether to file it. Inside was a trust amendment. Quiet, simple. It placed our home, this home, into a private trust with me as the primary trustee and Bryant as a successor. I'd signed it. Thomas had signed it. But I had never filed it with the courthouse. It was legal, just unfinished. Until now. I called the only person who still sent me birthday cards every year without fail, Thomas Dwyer, my husband's old law partner. He picked up on the second ring. "Delora," he said warmly. "Been a while." 2 days later, we sat across from each other at a corner table in a quiet cafe 2 towns over. He ordered black coffee. I had the same, mostly to keep my hands busy. I slid the envelope across the table. He unfolded the papers with the same steady hands I remembered from years of firm handshakes and firm advice. He didn't speak for a while. Finally, he looked up. "This is solid," he said. "Filed now, it trumps the gift deed." They never had full ownership. I swallowed. "You're sure?" He nodded. "Delora, they don't own this house. You do." The words sat heavy in the air. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just breathed full for the first time in months. Thomas reached into his briefcase, pulled out a fresh set of forms, and began filling in names. Mine. His. The county clerk's office. I sat quietly, watching the ink glide across the page. "They think I'm trapped," I said. He looked up. "They're about to find out you're not." And as he passed me the pen to sign, I already knew what I had to do next. I noticed it on a Thursday morning. The cold had crept back in overnight, and I reached for my winter coat, the long charcoal one with the stitched lining Thomas had bought me during our last Christmas together. It wasn't where I left it. Not hanging by the garage door. Not folded on the storage shelf. I searched the bins. Checked beneath the cot. Nothing. That afternoon, I saw Morgan on the phone out by the driveway. Her voice carried through the cracked window. "Yeah," she said, laughing. "We'll just wall it off and add a little kitchenette. Turn it into a mother-in-law unit or something. Passive income, right?" My name wasn't mentioned. But I knew. Inside, Bryant stirred soup on the stove. He didn't meet my eyes when I walked in to grab a mug. He hadn't, not really, in weeks. I stood there waiting for him to say something. Anything. "Coat's in the hall closet," he said finally, not looking up. I nodded. "Thanks." It was the last word we exchanged that day. That night I packed my personal papers, the notepad, the file from Thomas Dwyer, the signed trust amendment. I took the photo of Thomas and me from the garage shelf and wrapped it in one of Morgan's old dish towels. I left the rest. The cot. The blanket. The chipped coffee mug. At dawn, I slipped out the side door with my tote bag and a folder under my arm. I didn't leave a note. The rental car was waiting at the edge of the drive, still running the keys exactly where Thomas Dwyer said they'd be. I got in, shut the door, and pulled away. The sun was just starting to rise as I passed the familiar bend in the road where Thomas and I used to walk every Sunday. For a moment, I thought about turning back. But I didn't. The courthouse was quiet when I arrived, just 2 clerks and the janitor wiping down glass. By the time I stepped out again, the house wasn't theirs anymore, and the next time I walked through that front door, I wouldn't be a guest. The envelope was taped to the front door just beneath the wreath Morgan had hung last spring. Plain white. No return address, but the name printed on the front, Morgan Ellis, was sharp, deliberate. She tore it open, expecting junk mail or another HOA notice. Instead, she found 3 pages of legal documents. The top sheet was brief, direct. Notice of trust enforcement and title correction. Filed and executed under authority of Oregon state law. Primary trustee Delora Kincaid. Morgan screamed, loud enough that a neighbor stepped out to look. Bryant was already inside, pacing. He grabbed the papers from her hands and scanned them. His face draining color by the second. "This can't be right," he said, flipping the pages as if another version might appear. But it was right. I'd made sure every line was notarized, every record filed. 3 days earlier, I had handed the packet to Thomas Dwyer and said file it now. By noon, the county clerk had stamped the documents. That house, my house, was legally mine again. The locks had been changed that morning. Thomas handled it personally. A locksmith met him at the door, followed by a process server. They waited until Morgan and Bryant had taken the kids to school. Everything inside stayed untouched for now. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity, distance, control. Bryant called me 3 times that evening. I watched the phone light up on the motel nightstand. I didn't answer. The 4th call came after midnight. This time he left a voicemail. "Mom, please? Can we talk?" I deleted it, without listening to the end. The next morning he tried calling Thomas. He answered. "I have nothing to add," Thomas said. "Read the papers. She didn't take anything from you. She just reclaimed what was already hers." I knew they wouldn't leave quietly. Not yet. But the house was legally locked in trust now. They could scream, they could rage, but they couldn't undo the signature. That night I opened my motel window to let in the breeze. I hadn't felt that kind of stillness in years. And in the morning, I drove back not to reclaim anything, but to decide what came next. I didn't go back right away. I let the papers speak first. From the small window of my motel room, I could see the house through a line of trees. A moving van showed up late on a Friday afternoon. Not the expensive kind, just a local rental with 2 men who looked confused about what they were stepping into. Morgan stood in the driveway with crossed arms and dark sunglasses even though the sky was overcast. She paced while they loaded boxes, barked at them to be careful, said nothing to the neighbors watching from across the street. I stayed silent. The house looked smaller from the outside, not in size, just in presence. The life I'd built in it had already been hollowed out. What remained was mine only in paperwork and principle. A day later, I heard from Rita, the woman 2 doors down, who'd always brought over lemon pound cake for birthdays. She sent a message through Thomas. "Everyone knows," she'd said. "No one's falling for the act." Morgan had apparently started calling family saying I'd stolen the house, manipulated legal documents, threatened the kids' stability. But people asked questions. Had she really been living in the garage? Did Delora pay for the house? Was the deed even valid to begin with? Some truths don't need shouting. They just need daylight. Late that night, Bryant's voicemail came through. His voice cracked halfway through. "How could you do this to us after everything? This was supposed to be our home." I played it once, sat with it for a while, then played it again. Afterward, I turned off the lamp beside me and stared at the ceiling in the dark. "I didn't," I whispered to the room. "You did." I reached over and pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. Outside, the wind picked up. The tree branches knocked gently against the window pane like someone asking permission to enter. I didn't answer. In the morning, I'd walk through that house one last time, not to reclaim the past, but to mark the end of something that had already left me long ago. I agreed to meet him on a Wednesday morning at the diner off Route 17, the one with cracked red booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. We used to go there when he was in high school. After track meets, after breakups, after bad grades. He was already sitting when I walked in. Coffee half full, eyes red, hair messy. He looked older than 38. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly now. "Thanks for coming," he said. I nodded, but didn't smile. I sat across from him and wrapped my hands around the chipped mug the waitress slid in front of me. He started with excuses. Stress, pressure, mortgage rates, Morgan's temper, the kids, work. We never meant for things to get so bad. I let him speak, let him squirm through justifications and half-hearted apologies. He paused once, as if hoping I'd interrupt and take some of the weight off him. I didn't. Finally, he looked up. "Can we fix this?" I stirred my coffee slowly. "The house will be sold," I said. "You'll get half of what it's worth." "That's more than fair." His mouth opened, then closed. But it wasn't going to be anything I said. It was mine, And then I gave it to you? And then you let your wife put me in a garage. He looked down at the table. His fingers tightened around the mug. I'll never live like that again, I said. Not in this life. He blinked. What about the kids? What about them? I asked. I'm not cutting them off. But I won't be near Morgan again. You understand? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence said enough. We finished our coffee in quiet. The waitress brought the check. I paid. As I stood to leave, he reached out and touched my hand. I'm sorry, Mom. I nodded. Me too. I walked out without looking back. The sun was sharp outside, casting long shadows across the parking lot. That evening, I met with the realtor. By the end of the week, the for sale sign was in the yard. The cottage wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a narrow galley kitchen, and a porch that overlooked the river bend. The wood creaked when I walked the screen door stuck, and the furnace grumbled in the mornings. But it was mine. I signed the lease with the same hand that had once given away a deed. This time, I kept the papers in my own drawer under my own name. The day I moved in, I didn't bring much. A few boxes. My notepad. The framed photo of Thomas and me that used to sit on the mantel of the old house. I set it by the window facing east. He always liked the morning light. Each morning, I brewed a small pot of coffee, just enough for one. I sat on the porch with my hands wrapped around the cup and listened. Not for footsteps or doors slamming upstairs. Not for hushed arguments or the sound of cabinets locking. Just wind. Birds. The shifting of trees. No one labeled the milk. No one counted the slices of bread. No one told me where I could sit or what time I had to be out of the way. Some days I missed the noise, the mess of family, the rush of having someone to care for, but it passed quickly. Peace has a way of replacing hunger, especially when you've been starved for too long. Bryant still called once a week or so. We spoke briefly. Updates about the kids, his job. Never about Morgan. Never about the house. It sold faster than I expected. Half the money sits in an account with my name on it. The other half went to him. No strings, no contact. That was the final kindness I gave him. Quiet, clean, and finished. I hung a small wind chime on the porch beam last week. Just something light. It rattles when the breeze comes off the water. There's no echo of someone else's life here. No evidence of who I used to be inside that other house. Just a new key in my pocket, a new lock, and the sound of my breath steady and mine, filling up the silence without apology.